my experience involved a lot of sectors which are heavily impacted by sustainability matters. So I audited the biggest copper mine in the world for 4 or 5 years, audited one of the biggest agricultural companies in the world. And that gave me insights as to the impacts in terms of what companies do from a sustainability matter, not just becoming green or being, environmentally friendly, but also the negative aspects of water dumpage in rivers, or contaminating in terms of, chemical industry, manufacturing sites. So all of that gave me visibility that as soon as the TCFD regulation started being enacted in 2020, 2021 for listed entities, I saw myself as an opportunity based on my experience and industry insights. I could take TCFD on board and integrate it into my own decision making. So I think it's a mixture of the experience I gained gave me the visibility I needed to empower me to make that decision of selecting TCFD as my baby, some people call it. And then the second was the whole, I think, net zero. I'm from Chile as well. We lack of water. We lack of a number of areas Santiago is one of the most polluted capitals in the world. So from a personal matter, it was also a must do to try and help the world become, more green and more sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Yeah. Obviously, sustainability's gained significant prominence recently, and it's often discussed in the news, and it comes up in a lot of conversations I have with professionals. Why do you think it's the case that it's become so prominent recently, Jose?
I think there is two aspects in it's the direct aspect and an indirect aspect. Sustainability has always been there. I think the term has been misused a number of times in probably in the last 10 to 20 years. But the direct aspect of why sustainability has got up to the agenda of CEOs, CFOs, and stakeholders of companies is regulation. Regulation on climate change has been enacted in the UK. It's pushing companies to integrate TCFD. The UK has also approved ISBB. So for the people out there, TCFD is the Task Force of Climate Disclosures, and then the ISBB are the international sustainability standards that are being approved by the government. So those things are currently being integrated by listed companies, and that's the kind of direct effect, the direct regulation they need to comply with. Then if we look at the indirect effects, I'm very passionate about extreme weather. I think I've been raising this for three and a half years now, that the changes in extreme weather are not going to wait for the regulation to be enacted or to be integrated by everyone. And extreme weather affects employees, affects suppliers, affects your customers. And for me, companies that are issuing a net zero target without really considering the changes in weather may be affected by a disruption. And lastly, I think it's also the indirect effect of scarcity of resources. I think water is not available for everyone, fresh water. So people are going to fight it in the next few years, I imagine. And then I think if you step back and look at the amount of commitments on electric vehicles, I don't know where we can get all this lithium and sodium. So I think you got the direct effect regulation, as I said, and the indirect effect that there are risks from the environment that are crystallizing and affecting business models.
Right. So with that in mind, why do you think that finance leaders should be prioritizing sustainability at the moment?
I think in my view, is because accountants should be prioritizing it, for example, of financial professionals, because most of the information we report against or standards are all risk-based principle standards. So any risk that's crystallizing in the business model or affecting it needs to be considered from an accounting standard perspective. So I think if you're advising a client and the client gets flooded the next year and you were not able to monitor that, I think you're giving incorrect advice. And also, I think financial professionals should also consider that anti-money laundering checks, whenever you're going to engage with a client, are they do they have suppliers based in locations that are affecting the supply chain? For example, fashion, are they suppliers in China with human rights implications that may affect and cascade upwards to your organization? So those are things accountants need to really integrate, or financial professionals, into the decision making, because I think the world is we are very backward looking, historical information, and we make estimates of the future. At the moment, we've got something that is future happening that we can't really perform an accurate description of it. And therefore, in my view, it's the right time for people to increase their awareness and understanding of this before things get really, really, bad in terms of weather or disruption into business models.
How do you anticipate the field of sustainability evolving in the coming years, particularly in relation to finance and accounting?
How I personally would like to see it is that it should be integrated under each function of your business, not the separate, Gary or Dave who looks at sustainability in the other side and, they're issuing all these commitments that we need to review now. They need to be part of the whole team. They need to be part of the whole discussion, I think. And also, I think bringing sustainability field under each pillar of tax, your finance team, your inventory team, will bring some cost savings, will bring some opportunities. It's not just about risk. And I think people really integrating that. It's similar to, for example, I don't know, universities, when they do courses, I think there is the noise now of adding sustainability as a course. But, in my view, it should be that sustainability should be integrated into every course. Every course is impacted by sustainability. So that would be my personal view as to how I would love to see sustainability and ESG evolve, not the separate thing, not the separate political acronym, not the separate distinct function. Is more, let's bring them over, integrate them under each, build a steering committee to then determine, what are the right decisions to be made from a cost savings, because your strategy will be affected. Your business model will need to become net zero because the UK government issued a target of 2050, and therefore by 2050 your business model needs to be net zero. And the only way to do that is by bringing sustainability to the discussion under each key function that you have in your business. Yeah,
just regarding that target, Jose, do you think the UK is likely to reach the 2050 target? Do you think that sustainability will stay on the agenda over the next 25 years, or do you think it's something that governments will drift away from?
I think my view is the ambition is positive. I mean, the science is clear. Science says that if we don't do of mitigating an increase to 1.5 degrees. I don't want to get too technical in this interview, but effectively the science is clear there. And it says that if we don't reach this net zero target by 2050, weather will become much worse. We will have more climate refugees. We will have more issues with food security. Weather affects agricultural sector significantly. We will have less water and therefore more political fighting in the world. So I think from we must reach that target. Are we going to get there based on what's been happening in the current agenda? I'm hopefully I am optimistic, but we've had some announcements that have disappointed me about delays of the cars in terms of electric vehicles and replacing that. Also the misinformation on the low emission zone in London, which pollution is. The increase in ADHD in the world is because of pollution, in my view, significantly as well. But I think all of those areas are pushing that the target might not be reached. But again, I think don't think of the target being the end goal. I think is start integrating accountants now. Whether we started January 24, February 24 with the hottest on record again, and the wettest on record for the UK in February is going to end up. So are your clients affected by this? Have you asked the right questions? So the target is there, it's ambition, but start learning the information now is my view.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I'd agree, Jose. It seems to be on the agenda importantly and here to stay. So for accountants who are interested in transitioning their careers and I speak to them on a daily basis towards sustainability, what specific skill sets would you recommend that accountants develop to make themselves more applicable for the field?
I think we accountants have the skill of technical expertise in the sense of we like reading stuff. We like reading financial statements. We, develop scenarios. We develop risk frameworks. We as we call it, well, as some people call it, we could be the saviors of net zero because we're the first people that see all this information before sometimes it's issued externally and can raise concerns and challenges. So for me, the first one is stick to your values. I think that would be very important. I mean, don't sell your soul to the devil, as I call it. But if you see something that doesn't look right, net zero target by 2030, the UK is 2050, then challenge those things. Use your professional skepticism in terms of challenging the things or commitments that are just not realistic, and help the client. Don't obviously question them, or they probably did an assessment and they didn't understand it, but help them say, hey, by the way, I don't think that's appropriate. Investigate it. We can support you. And during that challenge, also increase your knowledge. I think, like I said to people, climate change can become very political. I think, in terms of that, in my family, it runs very political. Let me put it that way. I think religion affects the belief of climate change, if it's a topic of discussion on that sense. But I have these discussions with my mother in terms of climate change. But I think is don't be let down. If you learn so much information and you're trying to share with people, give them 3 chances, 4 chances. I think share the knowledge with other accountants. Some people might not listen to it, but they will listen to it 3 or 4 times. So have the patience of the knowledge you've gained. Be patient with the other individual, because it's a massive change. The sustainability landscape that's happening now, in terms of net zero, is no company cannot be net zero if you don't behave net zero. So that means you put in the waste in the right bin, you're using the right level of water, and based on what's currently happening at the moment, it's a blame game, in terms of who does this, who does that. So move away from the blame game and move away and understand that people need to learn this topic. And as accountants, you have a lot of guidance out there that can really increase that. And of course, if Andrew, anyone of the audience have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I can share those links. But you can go to IFRS education materials. You can go to ICAW website on climate change for SMEs, so climate change overall. You can go to ACCA, the client sustainability website has a lot of information. So the information is there, and the difficulty is obviously the scientific backing of it can be quite complicated, but that's something that we just have to navigate like everyone else, I think, is navigating. So think about the internet, when you started learning the internet and Excel and spreadsheet and words, and that was going to revolutionize the sector. And I think some people in the 90s were like, the internet's not going to work. Well, this is the weather is coming and you see it rapidly. So start learning it. I'm not saying look at the weather on BBC at night, but go on the Met Office reports and understand how your location is changing in terms of, weather.
Brilliant. Yeah, so if you're an accountant, you've done your research, you've got a solid background in accountancy or audit, and you're ready to make that transition. What practical steps could you take towards securing a sustainability-focused role? Is there any tips you could give, Jose?
I think it's, I just don't want to, move the question in terms of like transitioning to, I think it'd be interesting to see how accountants who transition into green, will they be called green accountants, or will they become, ESG accountants? I'm not sure. I think they'll still be called accountants. I think for us, it's new risks and opportunities that are crystallizing that we can help companies navigate. So the first practical step for me is TCFD. I think for me, TCFD has been a mind opener. It's a risk framework, and where have you, some accountants and risk experts can really help with the knowledge of climate change. Yeah, ignore scenario analysis for the meantime. That's something you can cover next year. But the risk of, extreme weather, what are they? Chronic, acute, how do they impact? It says financial statement impact on the right, so you can start integrating that every day. Then the second practical step I would do is look at the FRC TCFD report reviews they've done that can give you some visibility. What are companies doing? What are they doing on governance? What are they doing on risk management? But don't look at all of them. Only look at the companies that are in your sector. An accountant, if he's auditing or reviewing the accounts of an agricultural sector, then look at what Unilever are doing. Look at what those companies are doing to start thinking what's best practice in my head, because we as accountants love to benchmark. We love to check, A equals A with B, C, and then what does that get us? So I think those two practical steps, and then third, as I said, is the IFRS guidance. I think linking those three things will really equip you to then look at any risk. If then you look at GRA, Global Reporting Initiative, from that, then it can equip you for that, because TCFD, as I said, has the financial statement impact. You can link it to IFRS, you can link it to your sector, and then you can get a sector overview. And then with that, you start ingraining it in your day-to-day, and then, it becomes something that's natural for you. But I don't want, because it may be another area of greenwashing, of transitioning to green accountants. Hopefully we don't call green accountants to differentiate, similar to others, but we can maybe become, accountants, sustainable accountants. I'm not sure. I mean, because you also got accountants who do carbon accounting. So, so I think for me, those are the three practical steps in my view. I never learned at the beginning of my process what scope 1 was, what scope 2 was, because I was like, well, this is very scientific. So try and highlight the areas that are very scientific to the side, and that's something that's just going to take you a bit more time.
Brilliant. No, great advice, Jose. One thing I've noticed is I think that a lot of the ESG and sustainability focused positions are getting filled internally. So, for example, within the Big Four, they'll advertise the job internally to join the ESG team. And I think they get a lot of internal applicants because it's a popular area just now. So I think it can be quite hard for some accountants to break into ESG and sustainability, even if they want to. Jose, obviously, you've recently been scaling your team at Simplify Climate. Were all the hires that you made, did they come from an explicit background in sustainability, or were some of them able to demonstrate an interest in the field enough for you to give them a role?
For me, I agree. It's very difficult to get a role internally when you've got a company, offering a role or two roles for 500 people that are applying internally, 300, and then you've got 200 outside applicants, and you're kind of, and they all learn the same, in terms of that application. But for me, it was more, I think it all depends on the objective and mission of the company. I think bringing someone on the outside can really bring, dynamics in terms of an honest view and transparency. But then also bringing someone on the inside can really help things crack on. He knows the people, he knows who to contact, how we move things. So for me, the main request I asked in terms of my team building, because I'm a chartered accountant, were accountants. So I didn't ask for accountants involved in ESG role. There was a preferable or TCFD role. I wanted accountants who were involved in sectors that are affected by this type of risk, and therefore the skills I can teach them are transferable to their kind of areas. Also, I think what's important in the stuff I looked at was their values. I think, in my view, how family orientated they are. It was never a competence. I hate those competency-based questions where you're going through all of them and you lose focus, and then it's a checklist exercise, and then you get to the end of it and you're kind of like, okay, anything else? It doesn't feel human in that way. So also I'm bringing out different elements of interviews, and I think the first three candidates I've looked at, which have been successful, were all, the interviews went for an hour and a half, believe it or not, just talking about their passion, what do they do on a day-to-day, what do they think about net zero, what are they going to start doing to help, the world being sustainable in terms of their own themselves. So I think it's a mixture of, again, it's your values is key here in this net zero journey. Don't drop your values. If you're an integral person, if you are challenging, and you're there challenging alone, maybe you're not in the right place. I think maybe you need to find a more passionate business, and I think values are more important than in terms of the technical expertise, because everything is out there. Accountants, we're clever, we're very clever people, we're very intelligent. We go through massive sets of spreadsheet, we go massive through all the information. So for me, the key thing is don't let your values, or you've learned all that information your whole life, and then because of a net zero target, you become political, or you become, short-termism. I think about it long-term and bring that capacity. So So yeah, I think for me was no standard fixed point of you need to be at ESG trained 2 years. No, for me it was like, are you an accountant? Yes or no? I want to talk to you.
Brilliant. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's reassuring. Some brilliant advice there, Jose. So if you're speaking to a finance leader or a CFO, what strategies can they do to ensure that their organisation remains ahead of the curve in terms of sustainability practices? Is there some tips you could give CFOs out there who are
Yeah,
considering this?
I think I was presenting to a client last week, and I think that the key thing here is I explained to clients is do that quick diagnostic assessment. It's not we in my company we do a quick diagnostic assessment. I know a number of providers do, and determine the right budget after that diagnostic assessment as to my next 5 years. I call it we call it a simplified climate, the ESG doctor. So we come in, we give you a quick diagnostic assessment. It takes a couple of days, 3 days. We present it to the board and we say, hey, these are the 5 things you need to integrate in the next 5 years. This is the fee in terms of integration. Also, these are the cost savings that you can achieve that you need to start understanding how you can achieve those. And this is the impact from extreme weather. So then that gives them the decision making of what they want to integrate in small incremental steps. So my biggest advice would be do that diagnostic assessment as soon as possible to then help you evaluate, okay, what are my incremental steps that I need to do to integrate? Climate change can take up to 18 months of what I've seen. And if you look at the landscape, no one has really done it right. Because scenario analysis is still there. Scope 3 emissions are not really captured yet. So I think it's that direction of, well, don't be doing that in your first year if you're integrating it, focusing your governance. Who's going to manage your climate risk or ESG steering committee? That's year 1 done. Year 2, okay, let's do the carbon reduction plan, because your organization first needs to learn what they're going to start measuring, as opposed to, hey, go and measure it now. So that's what this diagnostic helps you. And budget it accordingly. I think if you're impacted by the EU regulation, there was I can't remember which company it was, but the cost that we're raising from a US to comply with the EU were in excess of $500,000. So the compliance costs, you don't want to be doing it in 2026 when you need to report 2027. So again, this diagnostic or the ESG doctor, I like calling it, will give you that chronic and acute inflammation in your body or in your model strategy that can help you budget it accordingly. So yeah, incremental steps is key rather than doing it all in one go.
Fantastic. Now, if there's any CFOs listening to this or watching this, how do they get in touch with you if they're considering doing an ESG diagnostic or want some advice, Jose?
The website is being released soon in terms of that. So that will be a point of access. Also LinkedIn, I'm available on LinkedIn. I submit every couple of days or every day an awareness climate news that I've read in the morning. I think the last one was ocean temperatures have reached another record. So I talk about breaking records all the time with everyone. So I think that's the kind of area of point of contact. I've also got my Instagram account. If people, are passionate I'm very passionate on gym activity, nutrition myself. So if you want to get some tips there, you can go there. And yeah, just my email. I can provide my email after you've got my contact details that you can share in the recording. But no, feel free. I'm the most approachable guy. We can have a chit chat. Doesn't need to be, we can have a nice intro for an hour, half an hour if we need to go through some of this stuff to help you open your mind in terms of the magnitude of the work that you'll have to do.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. That's fantastic, Jose. And must be brilliant working in an area that you're so passionate about. Just the last question I had for you is, how optimistic overall are you about, I know that the 2050 targets, that's important, but it's also political to some extent, but generally speaking, how optimistic are you about the future of ESG, sustainability, and where we're heading as a planet?
I think that's a very good last question. And I mean, I think in terms of how the direction of travel is currently going in terms of the topic in hand, I am slightly not that optimistic in terms of the political will to ensure that we as a society are a green society. And that requires, if you think about it, a massive change in education at schools, university at schools, the waste recycling management, another massive change, waste management. You've seen the issues with Thames Water. People are not happy. So the political will is affecting the transition of the world in becoming a more sustainable world. And the unfortunate thing of all of these delays is these countries that where the political will is needed, well, excluding the US, which is heavily impacted by changes in extreme weather, it's these impacts from weather are happening in locations of, undeveloped, which do not have very strong infrastructure to deal with these effects of flooding, of rain, of extreme rain or extreme heat. So I think for me that's where I'm not very optimistic, because also that period of the politician doesn't align with the period of 2050. So they're in power for 5 years, and we have 26 years to reach the target. So you're going to have 5 to 6 different prime ministers by then that may want to change, may want to update, may want to revise. So I think that is the difficulties in reaching that target. But I think if I step back to where we were 3 years ago to where we are now, there's been massive progress. Solar panel and renewable energy is much cheaper to where it was before. I know we have to evaluate how to recycle the batteries and also the blades, and that's something we need to invest to determine. But for me to generate energy from the sun and the wind and doesn't cause pollution is a great technology that we need to look into. So I think we shouldn't also forget the positives that we've seen in the world happening. But also I think the political will needs some improvements, in my view, to really tackle the topic and stop, saying A and then next year we're going to say B, and then next year we're going to say C. So yeah, that's my view, I think.
Yeah, I think on the ground the will's there. You can tell. I mean, amongst my friends, I think most people want to do their bit. I think where a lot of people struggle with sustainability and ESG is when you see 7,000 jets flying to Davos to discuss ESG, and then you think, well, it's a bit hypocritical. Sometimes, it's not. It's a bit of do as they say, not as they do, and I think that's something where maybe more consistency needs from a top-down messaging, and I think that part doesn't help. But yeah, if you see things going in the right direction over the past few years, Jose, and it's very reassuring.
And I think also, adding to that point that you say, if you think about the COP28 and the COP29, COP28 was in the United Arab Emirates, which is one of the biggest oil and gas producers and oil producers in the world. And then the next one is in Azerbaijan, which is another oil producer. So you got, obviously, I agree that it needs to be a transition, but you cannot be producing oil after 2050. I think that's what the science says. So, but then also the complexities is the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia is home to one of the biggest potential climate bombs, they call it, of the permafrost. So in the Arctic, you got all this carbon that's captured underneath the Arctic, and more Arctic routes are being opened for shipping because it's hotter. You got more access. So those are areas that, if the war continues and we cannot have an agreement in terms of political between those countries to monitor that, then that could be another impact in the world that we've never experienced before. So for me, it's people need to start really saying, I agree with you, people don't have the right information to make a change, but we're also not given the access to make that change. You still go to the supermarket and everything is in plastic. So I think there needs to be more done from companies, hopefully, in that sense as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, fascinating topic, Jose, and really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights, and I wish you all the best with Simplify Climate. I'm sure it'll be a massive success and you'll make a huge impact over the coming years.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for the opportunity. And if anyone is out there stressed, or how I call it, climate anxious, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have a discussion, 5 minutes. I can probably walk you through, try and calm you down, and share you some links that you can read and get familiar. But feel free. And if you, wanted to know more about Simplify Climate for your audience, feel free to reach out. But thank you for the opportunity, Andrew, and I hope you have a good lunch and afternoon ahead.
Cheers, Jose. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Take care.